So one, I don't know if this relates, but one experience that goes with the jazz musicians thing. The drummer for John Coltrane told about this time. They used to play in Philadelphia on Sunday afternoons. And one time a pad fell off John Coltrane's saxophone. Now, most people would put down the saxophone and um, get a new one. He said, no, this is my instrument now. And it took him about half an hour of squeaking and playing with it, but then he worked out how to play it. So he wasn't looking for the perfect instrument. It was complete improvisation and dialogue with what was at hand.
Yeah.
Whether it seemed whole or broken.
Yeah. God.
Whether it was the perfect answer or the question or the confusion.
And both, or both.
Yes, absolutely.
And it was both.
Yeah, and that multidimensional experience and reading of things gets closer to what things are.
Yes. Yes.
We name things, we tend to want to put them in some kind of order where the mind can step back and go, that's the way it is.
Right. We're done.
Forgetting that in that very moment, it's shifting and flowing and dropping away and crumbling that structure.
Right. And yet the value of starting out with some, like there has some container, but the container is fluid. So we can, it's like the intention. We set intention. We know in that moment we set an intention, whatever's rising up in us lively in that moment, the intention, knowing that the intention is going to change and transform and mutate and become another iteration at some point. But we begin somewhere, and somewhere isn't the end where. It's a launching place that opens up and opens up and opens up, and it doesn't stop opening up.
Right.
And that's what for me I think gets forgotten. Like it's never ending, and intellectually we know this, and we have experiences of it along the path. I do. And yet in once the limbic brain gets connected and is like running the show, there's an ending. Like, let that ending be now so I can be out of like pain and have relief. Or when I get to the end, when I get there, then all will be well. But there isn't necessarily a there. And yeah, I love the jazz. I love the improvisation. And how do we uncondition all those conditioned parts for hundreds and thousands of years that have us like showing up now without what the pads fell off somewhere along the line. Pads fell off. We lost parts that were useful, that helped us make our music in whatever way we made it. So now we're kind of hurpling along, missing bits and pieces. And yet that's always the case. So how can the music right now be sweet? And how can we be with the wonky, like experimental place of how do we play the instrument now, with it being different than it was a half an hour ago or 10 years ago or 1500 years ago? And how do we live in that, like what conditionings must go in order for us to build a muscle that sustaining that relationship, that knowing?
Well, it's the container, having a container that invites everything in without exclusion. And it's realizing that it's going on already below the surface, and it's about tuning into that. It's like our friend Tim Britton told me once. He said he felt that Irish music was always playing. When he played, he just was joining the music as it was going along. And this thing about starting and stopping, in nature and in life, there is no finish line. There is no start line. We label those things to have a structure, but there's no birth and there's no death. There's rebirth and dissolution, but it's a constantly fluid situation. So it's having this container that invites everything and not trying to freeze frame anything. For me,
Yep.
it's approaching things as a process
Yep.
rather than an object.
Yep.
That I am a process, you are a process. Even the stones in an old wall in the forest are a process,
Yep.
and that it's that desire to kind of try to go, whoa, let's stop things. And if I could just stop, then it wouldn't seem so crazy and I could make sense out of all this.
Yes.
Then the stillness can be in moving with that flow
Yes.
rather than fighting it.
Yes.
And that's not moving like a limp, dead fish with the flow, but with alertness.
Yeah. 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 There can be a thriving in that. Um, Beautiful. I love I love, for me, there's a reframe or like we get to hold on to meaning long enough for it to allow us to land and arrive. And the
Yeah.
minute that we turn it into meaning everything all the time, then we've forgotten again. We've forgotten again. So the meaning that I heard that came from you through me is this: the container is, we think of a container as something that holds, and we think of it as something that's foundational material. But when the container is ongoing,
Yes. The
then
fluid container.
it's a living paradox. It's the container is the ongoing, and it's like, oh, of course it is. And it, again, it's that reframe that takes me out of that oblivion into that, oh God, yes, of course. And I know what that feels like. The music is always, I just tap into it, I just become present to it, I open up to it, I become it, I'm already it. But I'm remembering that I'm it. It's the remembering again and again, remembering again and again.
And it's raising our instrument to join in. And
Yes.
that holding on is, to me, it's that temporary, or it's that fluid moment where I'm holding on, that I'm seeing, that allows me to see beyond the uh, the structure that I'm holding on to.
Yes.
That
Yes.
the purpose of the structure is not the structure itself. The purpose is a vehicle, is a vessel,
Yep.
is the kayak on the river, so to speak, that allows us to flow with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that the structure and shape of the container is about that fluid life. I mean, I remember a time in my life where everything fell apart, and I realized I was not living on solid ground anymore. I was living in a watery world of transformation. And what had worked in my mental experience of living on solid ground was not going to work in this new environment. And I had to get with it or drown in a way. And it was a sink or swim thing. And then it's like learning that it's a friendly place too. And in fact, it's more alive and uh, and renewing at every moment. And that the solid ground was served its purpose, but it was an illusion in a way.
Yeah. And when I'm present to that flow, when I'm present to the ongoing, being part of that, in that, and it's a direct experience, there's an expansion. That's how I relate to it as this expanded feeling. And it's when I contract, when some event, something, and I all of a sudden realize that I'm in this ongoing, this always fluid movement, that it's like, holy shit, I'm gonna drown right now. And that's when the contraction happens, the clenching onto something. and and will we ever, as humans, will I ever get to a point where I don't contract? I don't know, and it doesn't matter. It's because even in the contraction, I'm still in the ongoing.
Yeah, well, it's funny because paradox, which is something you've brought up and we've talked about before, it's like, when does a contraction become at the same time the expansion.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
that's another aspect of this. It's like going from either or consciousness to both and.
Mhm.
So
Yes.
and either or we're dividing things and separating things so that we can understand them. And that's what our culture is about, and science and all that takes that approach. It's dissecting rather than integrating.
Yeah.
But the both and is what nature is doing. You know, everything has its integrity. The tree needs it, what it needs to thrive, and the hawk needs what it needs, and the squirrel needs what it needs. But it's all woven together in this in this fluid system that where everything thrives. And so to live that both and experience, you know, it's like people say the glass is half full or but half empty. Well, why can't we say it's both half full and it's half empty?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, this is a huge, like, this is a huge paradigm shift. It's enormous. It's the pink elephant in the room, right? And we're all part of it. We're all subscribers to it. And as we integrate another way, the and way, the both way, it messes with our sense of equilibrium. It messes with our head and our hearts and our guts. And for me, I find communion, connection in knowing that just being able to talk about this, and that I'm not alone, because that's part of my, I forget. And I'm so grateful that there's a willingness here both ways for us to talk about this in a way, for me, that which helps anchor in a way that helps me stay in the flow of it. So again, another paradox, anchoring into something that is ever changing and moving rather than anchoring into one fixed way, and the mutability of it all. Mm.
Yes, and that, you know, an image of that might be architecture, which
Mm.
seems very fixed, but at the same time, it is changing every moment as the sunlight moves around the sky, the from morning till night till, you know, and through the night. The experience of the space is different. It's always changing. As we're moving through it, we're changing the space. So it's a structure that seems unchanging, but when we really look at it and experience it, it's constantly changing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's our level of view of it. You know, it's like in a way, the word house is a concept. It's not because that's too abstract. Because a house is made of plumbing and floors and walls and roof. And as when we get beyond the concept of house and we start to look at the details, it becomes more vivid and alive. But those details are woven together to make that whole thing, the house. And um, and so that's what we're doing as we go through the day. We're weaving our structures that we see that give us some stability, like you're pointing out, that allow us to engage. So it's not like we go out to the river and we just fly into the river and drown going downstream. We take a kayak or a canoe or something, and we take our vehicle and we can participate with change and be in change. And that's what's our vehicle that's necessary for that.
Mhm. Yeah, beautiful. I love that word, that phrase, participating in change rather than sometimes being, at the inevitability of it and being at the mercy of it somehow, but participating with it, being a collaborator, a co-creator with it. There's so much more agency there, isn't there? Um,
Yeah. Well, yes, that word collaboration is,
Yeah. Yes.
and we are collaborating with life. If we're not, we don't breathe. We don't have air to breathe. We don't have food to eat. We don't have language to speak. We don't have DNA to make our bodies. We have nothing with our collaborations. We are, in a sense, the distillation of our collaboration, not in a fixed way, but in an ongoing, fluid, alive way.
Yes. Yes. Um, I loved as you were sharing about like the changeability of architecture and sort of the paradox or the reframe or the deepening of perspective around something that appears fixed, that of course is constantly in flux. And for whatever reason, my imagination took me to that corner in the dwelling, whether a cathedral or a humble home where a spider spins a web, and that in within that structure there's this change happening. And of course, yes, as the light plays, as the water falls, it's always in a static and dynamic state. um, and it reminded me too of just my relationship with story and storytelling, and how what's possible by tapping into story. And the story is like a river, and when you add that it's an oral story, and I'm not anti-reading or anti-literature, but once we fix it into a book, it's like it's imprisoning it. And when we can take it off the page and let it live in this luscious play between the teller and the listener, with all of the other beings that are present, from the table to the light to the sun to the tree to the grass. And this ongoing, we're it's the business of ongoing, the story constantly changing. Yes, there are elements that are similar from telling to telling, and yet there's constant change happening, and the aliveness in that, and we've forgotten, as things seem to be dissolving in so many ways, these structures that we've put our faith in, right? All these years, for thousands of years in some cases, are beginning to shift and move, and it's an earthquake beneath us constantly. And that, creates what it creates for those parts of us that want to have this fixed relationship with reality. um
Well, again, it's that both and thing. It's
yeah,
like
yeah,
every
yeah,
time you tell a story, it's new again because of the circumstances, not only of you, but the situation you're in, who you're telling the story to. It's a different story, and at the same time, it's the same story. So,
yes,
and it's like that's been passed on from people before us. They've distilled the experience of the story, and at the same time, I don't know if this happens when you're telling stories, if there's new way of saying it comes up, or a
yeah,
new plot twist that comes to mind that you're catching as it's arriving and feeding into the story, so that it's a living thing.
yes,
And and I don't know if this relates, but I remember reading this about this anthropologist who was in the Amazon, and this old elder was telling the children the story of creation, and every night he would tell a totally different story.
mm,
and, and he said to this elder, why are you telling a different story every night for the story of creation? And he says, do you think that the world was only created once?
mm,
And I loved how that blew apart this idea. It's like, this is the story, and
yes,
we've got it now. These are the facts,
yes,
and we can just kind of go to sleep now in a way,
right,
rather
right,
than, yeah, each moment when we breathe, the creation is happening. Each day when we get up, it's a new creation. And to me, that's what's exciting. One of the things about that's exciting about being alive, that it's not about attempting to get all the ducks in a row. It's more like fly, ducks, fly, and let's see what happens.
Mm, 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 mm,
Because I don't
mm.
think ducks, I don't know how ducks feel about. I guess they are in a row when they're the mother duck is swimming along and the baby ducks are behind it in a row.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a phenomenon. And even when they're not, I've seen groupings of ducks, and I don't know what a group of ducks is called, a clutch, I don't know. But there's no mama. There might be obviously a hierarchy there, but they'll sit in a row, and that's not
Mhm.
uncommon. So there's something about the way that they are aligned, and that instinct of being in a row together. So yeah, total tangent. Hmm.
But it's not in a way, it's kind of like, in one sense, things want to go in a straight direction. Water wants to fall with gravity. But the interest of the story is the twists and turns that runs into,
Yes.
the unexpected uh, shape of the path that unfolds, and how we respond to that brings out deeper aspects of who we are.
Mhm. Yeah.
And and that's one of the things I love about stories, is that someone takes an action, a character, and the character expects a certain result, but something else totally different happens. It's like, now what? And how that character reaches down within themselves and takes another step forward is what unfolds the story. And it's beautiful when it's unexpected.
Yes. Yes. And being able to be present to that as a human who, might be in a place where there have been too many unexpected, unplanned journeys that have kind of piled up on top of them. But we can come to a story and watch it play out, participate in the playing out of it through active listening, through active imagining, through the story moving in the space between. And we can see, oh, look, that happened, that was unexpected, and what's going to happen next. And we get to be in that place of being curious to see what's going to happen next. And we can apply that to our own lives by saying, oh, here I am, all these unplanned events, this unexpected twist, this turn, what's going to happen next?
Right. And can we be both anticipating, which is natural, and at the same time just observing, just
Yeah.
just alert enough to kind of see what's happening without feeding in our
Right.
own idea that distorts what's happening.
Correct. And even when we forget and this distortion begins, like then that becomes part of that,
Yeah.
the beautiful complication or continuation. What happens next? Well, what happens next is I totally shut down, go into a shame spiral or whatever, and triggered by some wound that happened, 25 years ago. And it's kind of like, oh, we're going to go that way. Okay. But eventually, that'll change and we'll come back into whatever is then.
Yes. And I've been through that enough times now that when it starts to happen, I go, all right, here we go again. There's no need to kind of go keep my sunny side up and force it, because I'll miss something. There's something in the organic transformation, the kind of cooking, the alchemy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to wallow in depression or anything like that, but when my body and my psyche are just calling me to rest and digest what is happening, rather than got to get out of this to the happy place, to the smiley face.
Yeah.
and that it's we miss some opportunities there.
I agree. I agree. And to be able to bear witness to others
Yes,
in places and noticing what comes up for our in our own bodies and is also an opportunity and for growth and for support both personally and then with another, I think.
yes.
Mm.
And there's something about the mystery of it. Here's another architectural example.
Yes.
Years ago, I went on this kind of sacred places journey,
Yeah.
and I went to a lot of temples and cathedrals in different cultures, and they all had this combination of light and shadow and space and that kind of thing. And I went to a modern cathedral outside of Paris near the end of the trip. And it was a beautiful contemporary design, a circular building with a slanted roof that was all a skylight. And I walked in there and it was filled with light and it was like a cafeteria. And I realized in this play of light and shadow, in the shadow, the mystery of what was going on was as important as the place of light, that it wasn't about all being defined and being able to be named, but there was also that aspect that could never be named. And the mixture of that experience, it just went back and back and back and back. And it was so deep and powerful.
Mm.
And it was so in the invitation of that, it was, again, that gets back to me of having the idea of having the container that receives all impulses.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you look at those cathedrals and temples, they do have all impulses. It's the yin yang of life. It's not just the creative, because in creation there's destruction, in destruction there's creation, and in expansion there's contraction, and it's this coexistence of opposites. And experiencing that in an open way that confounds my intellect sometimes, but it's just kind of like opening to that energy of that and allowing that to work on me, that is so powerful. And
Yeah. Yes. And there in that sharing of that experience, there's something about wanting to step out of talking about these things and in your sharing of the story, like I was there and I wanted more. I wanted to feel that light and shadow. I wanted to feel the named and the unnameable. And I'm wondering if you would kind of paint us a picture and tell me a story and grace us with the shared experience of you bringing us back there. What was the day like? Was it summer? Was it autumn? What did it smell like? What colors were present? Do you mind coloring in your experience
yes,
for
this will be
me?
a story of two places to contrast, and both in France, both about an hour outside of Paris, but in different directions. So the first one is Chartres Cathedral, which is, to me, kind of like a mothership of these cathedrals. And I remember going there on a Friday. On a Friday, they pull back the chairs because that's where the labyrinth that we all experience, or many people have experienced, comes from. So it was a Friday morning, and I walked inside, and there was hardly anybody there. And even with all the stained glass windows, it was dark. It was a cave. It was a womb-like experience. And so I started to walk the labyrinth, winding path, and I looked up on the wall above the labyrinth, and there's the rose window, the west rose window. And it turns out that the labyrinth is about 42 feet in diameter, 42 feet across. That rose window is 42 feet across. It's the same outside structure. And I saw the amazing foresight of the architects and builders who built this. Here was Earth. I was on the winding path of Earth. But any moment I could look up to the radiant rose window, the perfectly symmetrical design of heaven. So it was just what we've been talking about today. It was what we define and what we can't define, and they come together. And then the bells started to chime. And the bells there are not pretty. There's these ancient gongs that just reverberate from some other place in the human psyche that is not about a pretty song that you might hear on a college campus from the bell tower. And so then in contrast to this other place, it's the town is called Every. It's the cathedral at Every. And I went out there on the train, and it was not in a pilgrimage place. Sharp's Cathedral had been a pilgrimage place for hundreds of years. And I was excited to see it because I love the architect, his work, who had designed this building. And again, it was I don't know if it was a Friday, but they didn't have it, but there was no one there. So I had this whole place to myself. And I went in, and I wanted so much for it to be this wonderful experience. But it was just like I said, like a cafeteria. It had no dimensions to it. The physical thing was beautiful, but the space within it was dead. And now thinking back on it, I'm reminded of this sentence from Lao Tzu where he says, we hammer space for a house, we hammer wood for a house, but it is the inner space that makes it livable. And again, that's what we are talking about. We're hammering wood, we're making our structure, but it's the inner space that has dimensions and no dimensions at the same time that makes it livable. And so the inner space of this other cathedral was just one-dimensional in a way. It was not multidimensional. And so I looked around, took some photographs, and got back on the train. And I'm glad I experienced that because I experienced the contrast. It made me understand more deeply about not just Gothic cathedrals, but in Hindu temples and other places that I'd gone. And there was always that play of light and shadow. Yeah. So my story has no conclusion, but those are two scenes from the story.
Perfect. No, it's perfect. And I get so curious to know, not as a way to try and replicate or create a blueprint or a recipe or some kind of prescribed, ordered way. But clearly, if this cathedral at Chartres held that play for you, held the shadow and the light, the mystery and the named, and the other place, which I've forgotten the name of, what was it again?
It's Evie R-Y, I think it's spelled.
Okay. And it didn't have that at this point. You're the day that you visited.
Right.
So as an architect by trade and as a human engaging in your life, how do we make space for that which is not replicable to arrive? How do we make space? Is it just by complete fluke? Is there some kind of path that will support that energy showing up? In your experience, I mean, there's no right or wrong answer.
Right. Well, what comes up is to actually look at what's going on, look beyond my preconceptions of what I want things to be. And this gets back to the both and allow myself to see more dimensions of the situation. So let's think of an example. Um, um, Nothing's coming to mind at the moment, but um,
Back to jazz.
mm, I'm trying too hard.
Yeah, and that's all right. And that's all right. That's, this is what we do. This is what we do. This is what we do. And so here we are. Here we
Yeah.
are. And
Well, it's like I'm trying, it's like I'm going against what I said. I have a preconceived structure that I'm trying to overlay
yeah,
on the situation
and
rather than,
maybe that's it.
rather than, thinking of some time when, I looked into the garbage and I saw this combination of colors that was beautiful.
Mhm.
Or, well, it's been such a habit I've developed over years of looking of being present for things and really looking.
Mhm.
And well, it was interesting. I ran into a friend yesterday at the market, and you know, we have such a thing in our society about aging and wrinkles and things like that. And I hadn't seen her in a while, and I was noticing how wrinkled her face was, but at the same time, how beautiful she was.
Mhm.
And it was really beautiful to just experience that
Mhm.
and just see the life and light in this woman's face and the beauty. And it had nothing to do with the clear skinned youthful faces that we see on advertisements and everything like that. and there was something about, I mean, we didn't talk for a long time, but there was a depth of connection that I think comes from just living life a long time and comes through when we allow it to.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, that's lovely. I just want to rest in that. I want to pause and breathe into that. Again, your story of this experience. Without being curious, without wondering, just that, the beauty and the simplicity of that, the magic of that, and the recognition of that. Hmm. Hmm. And funny, me being me, I want to ask, is it that wonderful place, Whole Earth in San Rafael?
In Fairfax, Good Earth.
Okay, a Good Earth. Yes, I love that place. Oh my God.
Yes.
Ah, hmm. So I love that we can, when faced with, we could call it a dilemma of, it, there wasn't an example that came up when I had asked that question earlier about what is it? How do we create? How do we leave space? How do we uplift? How do we perceive that play of the named and the mystery and make space for that to show up? And you thought about it and felt like you're trying to grab for something, and then we just kind of slipped out the side door into a story, another story, an experience, your experience just yesterday, still fresh in your body, where that was alive in you, that the shark experience, right? The play of
Right.
mystery and yeah. And these experiences, when we have them, are just like breadcrumbs of grace. I call them grace because they take me out of kind of those dead ends in me and create space and spaciousness and connection, and aliveness. So there may never be an answer, but the continued inquiry of this play. I'm just coming back to this again because it feels juicy, this play of light and shadow, of the mystery, not, we can't see it. It might even have something to do with its brokenness, the wrinkles, the unsightliness that does its thing that we have no control over, but get to experience.
Well, and telling the story of it enhanced the experience.
Exactly.
Being back.
Yes.
And I realized in the beginning of when we started doing this, I was unconsciously thinking of, it'd be like being in some war zone and seeing flowers blooming or something like that. Kind of a cliche of coexistence of opposites.
Yeah.
And discover it in the everyday, which is going on. And then maybe to look for that in ways, if the mood came across me to do that.
Mm. Mm.
And there's something, the thing of compassion comes in somehow,
Mm.
that it's like I go to the market, and there's all these human beings with their lives and their wonderful lives and their brokenness, and we're all sharing in what it is to be human. And sometimes just in a glance or a short exchange, that connection comes through. And other times it's like I'm in my bubble, they're in their bubble. And the image, the surface appearance is what takes place. But it's like the name in a way is like a surface summary of something. But then when we can reach through that or go through that name to the unnameable,
Yes.
things come alive. Then we discover the treasure that we didn't know was there.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, back to the process. And I love the way that the named is in relationship with the unnamed, with the mystery, and the name serves a function, serves a purpose. But the purpose isn't the end. It's not, its job is not the end result, which is again almost kind of a mistake of the intellect. The purpose is kind of like, again, the finger pointing onwards,
Yes.
through and beyond.
And into. So it's not just saying, okay, that's a maple tree. And then I've got that categorized, move on. It's like,
Yeah.
I can go, that's a maple tree. Let me look closer
Yes.
at that. What are the leaves like in this?
Yeah.
What's the trunk? Uh, how does the wind sound through that particular tree?
Yeah.
And then going deeper. There's a
Yeah.
leaf there.
Yeah.
Going through that name
Yeah.
into the mystery of what's in the leaf.
Yeah.
And it seems that what happens, we keep going deeper, we go to the formless. We go through these forms. These forms are framing our steps
Yes.
into life, into the play of the mystery and the known and the unknown, the light and the shadow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's always an invitation. Come deeper.
Yeah.
Come step deeper into this situation.
Yeah. Yes. And it makes me think about story and how the story is always in movement. There's always momentum because it's like, what happens next? What happens next? What happens next? What's what's the
Right.
next window that
And
opens here?
yes,
And
exactly.
the matryoshka of it, the mothering, the matryoshka means mother, and it's
Mm,
those Russian dolls nested, 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 nested. And so we get to the mother of all things,
yes.
this formless inexplicableness, mysterious. Yeah.
Yeah, my
Yeah.
grandmother had those dolls, and it's it's amazing how universal. It's like I didn't have any explanation as a child what that was all about, but it's just fascinating me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And when we love a story when we're going, what's next?
Next,
That's got
next.
our attention. And the attention is not to blind us to overshadow our awareness. It's to and pin our awareness down
Mm.
or us down is to open up.
That's right. Invitation, invitation, invitation. And like any invitation, we arrive at the party And maybe we want to stay for a while
Right.
before the next invitation.
And even in that staying for a while, what's this food taste like? What's this
Yes,
music
yes,
like? There are
yes.
openings everywhere. That's the thing. It's like form is not a obstacle to the formless.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Name
yeah.
is not an obstacle to the limitless,
No.
liminal, as you were talking about in the beginning.
Yeah, yeah,
It can be an opening if
yeah.
we approach it with as an opening. Like
Yes.
what like and with curiosity
Yep.
rather than I know it all.
Yeah.
And that's the wonderful thing about traveling is
Oh,
go to a place where I don't know anything. And then my senses, everything is so alive.
yes.
Somebody sweeping the sidewalk early in the morning is a wonderful experience.
Is ecstatic. Yes, yes,
The language, not even not understanding the language, but the sound of the language as music
yes.
is beautiful.
Yeah.
And how they create doorknobs in that place or doors or windows and seeing the life of that place
Yes,
as if as if seeing anything for the first time.
yes. The sentience of a stranger.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. I remember how I longed for that after the travels had ended.
Mm.
I longed to be in that. Yeah. And I think that's what we're talking about. This, they're in the grocery store having this experience in a familiar place, in the mundane, in the day to day, having the sentience of a stranger.
And we recognize ourselves in that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's it's it's like beneath all those layers, beneath all those frames, that connection is connection with our deepest self, which is their deepest self.
Yeah.
And somehow for a moment that shines through.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. This has been extraordinary, as it always is, Tony.
Yes,
And I feel full,
I do too.
full to bursting. Tears could be spilling. Yeah. Hmm. And even as I hold this and feel the fullness of it, I'm aware of wanting to hold on to it.
Well, that's natural too. We want to grasp the stream.
We
And,
do.
and it's like the beauty of it is that it is flowing through our fingers. We cannot grasp it. And so it becomes more precious in a way.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Ephemeral.
Yes. And that over time, I think I'm learning to be able to appreciate it and not cling or cling
Yeah.
less to it or
Yeah.
or cling to it and appreciate that I cannot cling to it.
Yeah. 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 Mm.
And in a way, that's that both and thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like giving in to that impulse. Yes, I
Yes.
want to
Yes.
hold this. I want to
Yes.
feel this. I don't want this to go away. And at the same time, knowing and accepting that's impossible.
Yeah. or not presently possible.
Yes. Yes. And that whatever we experience is okay.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Mm, mm, mm.
And in a way, that's what stories and architecture are for. They're places where we come again and again,
Again and
not
again.
to experience the same exact experience, but to open again and
Yes.
again
Again and again and again.
and
Oh,
discover what is rising up, what is alive within us.
wow. Yep.
So that making a cup of coffee, cup of tea, any simple thing that we do offers us a doorway.
Again and again. To the ongoing.
Yes.
Again and again. Well, so do you think other people would want to hear
Yes.
what we've been gassing on about?
I think they would love it because,
So,
oh, yeah, this is what people want. Not everyone, but it it's like so much, people are like this, do these 5 steps and that's all well and good, but very few people are playing this kind of jazz.
right. But this is the jazz that I want to play. This
And I
is the
think,
jazz I know. I've tasted it. I taste it and I want more of it.
yes, and it's kind of in this space of, okay, we're at this point,
Mm,
everything's changing. What do we do? And again, to say we don't have to do anything to pin it down,
yeah.
but we can engage in conversation and dialogue and,
And stories.
and stories. And
Your stories, these experiences, they bring us into a felt experience in our body.
yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know who the author was, but she said the universe is made of stories. You probably know who.
Muriel Rucksecker.
And I would say the universe is remade through stories again and again.
Yes, please. Yes. Okay, my dear.
All right.
I feel like I just need to stop on an island. The river is moving, and I need to just stop and lie there in utter awe and breathe. Inhale and exhale and inhale and exhale, and just let this like soak, soak, soak and flow in and through me.
Beautiful. I feel that too.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, Tony. I'm so excited and I'm so happy. I'm so grateful.
I am too.
So I will send you a copy of this recording. And well, would you like me to put this up on YouTube and make it unlisted, meaning it would be shared between us, or make it public and then we can both share it wherever we want to share it?
Let's put it out there.
Let's put it
Let's
out there.
invite people, to the dialogue.
Come in to the river. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I love you so much. Thank you.
And I love you so much.
Okay. We'll see you on Sunday. Big hug.
Yes. Big
Okay.
hug. And yes, this was wonderful.
It was so good. Oh my God. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.